When you think of skyrocketing brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, it's easy to credit their success to great products, sleek branding, and brilliant marketing. But here's the overlooked secret. The real magic lies in the engine behind the scenes, the business powering their business. For millions of brands, that engine is Shopify, making selling seamless for them and shopping effortless for us. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Alo Yoga uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/retail, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/retail to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/retail.
Hi there, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. And today I want to talk about the various paradoxes of Iran in the 1970s before the Islamic Revolution, and the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Um, so I'm going to dive in. We're looking at a book, Strange Rebels by Christian Carroll, which looked at four figures: Deng Xiaoping, the Pope, the Ayatollah Khomeini, and Margaret Thatcher, and how in 1979, all of them have a moment which shapes the subsequent decades and which shapes the world in the 21st century. So let's talk about Iran. And by the way, there's going to be some links below. I've done a series of essays on Iran on the website. So if this is something you're interested in, something you're following, and something that you're studying, follow the links because there's a little kind of history there of the Iran from the 50s to the 1980s. So Christian Carroll writes, Iran in 1977 was one of the world's great economic success stories. When the Shah ascended the throne back in 1941, at the age of 21, his country had been an economic and political dwarf. Indeed, the Shah owed his crown to two outside powers, the Great Britain and the Soviet Union, that had invaded the country and deposed his father, Reza Pahlavi, for what they deemed to be his friendliness to Nazi Germany. In the 1940s, Iran was a feudal backwater where the central government could barely collect taxes. 3 decades later, it was an industrial powerhouse with a strong centralized state. Its growth rates, averaging 9 to 10% for the decade between 63 and 73, were astonishing. It boasted modern communications networks and healthcare systems, car factories, and hydropower dams. Literacy was expanding. Iranian universities were filled with uply mobile youth, or almost as many women as men, and thousands of others were studying overseas, all aspiring to join the ranks of the ever-expanding middle class. Iran's military was the envy of the Middle East, well trained and armed with the latest weaponry. There's a fantastic chapter in Anthony Sampson's book, The Arms Bazaar, about Iran and McDonnell Douglas, and one of the biggest arms deals of the 20th century was for McDonnell Douglas aircraft, F-16s, I believe, to the Shah's government, which, of course, once the revolution happened, the Ayatollah essentially said, "Well, we're not paying for those." So Iran, a lot of the reason for this explosive growth is the fact that Iran is a client state of the United States of America. The Shah's rule had started off in uncertainty. The Allied invasion plunged Iran into chaos, but it also freed up its political development. The departure of the Shah's domineering father, who had been known to administer personal beatings to his political opponents, ushered in an era of ferment. Political parties came out into the open to fight parliamentary elections. Opinions proliferated in the media. In the end of the 1940s saw the rise of Mohammad Mosaddegh, the reformist prime minister who rode to power on a wave of populist demands. Mosaddegh refused moderate socialism with an anti-colonial nationalism into a programme with broad electoral appeal. He made himself immensely popular by nationalising the British-dominated oil industry in 1951. The British, who had built the Iranian oil industry, well, hold on a moment, the British who had to some degree built the Iranian oil industry, unless it was hundreds of thousands of British builders. I mean, the point is, of course, here that Iranians built it too, and the sort of the way in which the oil industry is built, just as the way in which um, oil industries had been built across the Middle East, had been as means of colonial expropriation. British, writes Christian Carroll, who built the oil industry, were accustomed to keeping the lion's share of the revenues to themselves, a fact well known to the impoverished Iranian citizens who were left to suffer the consequences of their country's underdevelopment. Because the Shah was so dependent on outside powers, Mossadegh's move undermined the very foundations of the Iranian monarchy. In 1953, prodded by the British, the US CIA collaborated with a camarilla of royalist schemers and disaffected generals to topple Mossadegh's government. From now on, firm in the knowledge that he enjoyed the patronage of the world's most powerful country, the Shah managed to reassert control over the political system, rolling back the constitutional limits to his rule and establishing a ruthlessly effective secret police, the Savak, which received training from the United States and Israel. One of the great ironies I find that kind of Mossad trained the Savak, and everything that they knew was passed on to the future Iranian security and secret police services under the Shah. After the fall of Mossadegh, the Americans and the British agreed with the Iranian government on a more equitable sharing of revenues from the sale of Iranian oil. The Shah's authoritarian instincts coexisted with a strong desire to modernize his country, and now he had the resources to make it happen. The Shah's father had instilled in him a great admiration for Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who created the new Republic of Turkey from the ruins of the Ottoman Empire in the wake of World War One. Ataturk was a ruthless modernizer, a secularist, and a fan of all things Western, who forced the Turks to wear Western clothes, embraced European styles of education and political institutions, and imposed the Latin alphabet on the Turkish language, written until then in Perso-Arabic script. The young Mohammad Reza Shah wanted to follow suit, but he wanted to do it in a way that that would respond to Iran's unique conditions and at the same time cement his reputation as a monarch in step with modern times. The Shah lacked the political skill and talent and charisma of Ataturk. The changes that Ataturk made in Turkey lasted a century. They're being slowly reversed now under Erdogan, but the world that the Shah wanted to build copied on Ataturk didn't last anywhere near as long. The young Mohammad Reza Shah wanted to follow suit, but he wanted to do it in a way that would respond to Iran's unique conditions and at the time cement his reputation as a monarch in step with modern times. He also wanted to steal some thunder from Iran's powerful Communist Party, the Tudeh, as well as respond to insistent demands for reform from the new Kennedy administration in Washington. So you have the overthrow of the Shah of Mosaddegh under Eisenhower, and the chief motivation really is to undermine progressive or radical nationalism that would have placed the ownership of oil in the hands of the Iranian people. Much as 3 years later, there is an attempt by the British and the French and the Israelis to overthrow Nasser in Egypt to secure the Suez Canal. The Americans were much less enthusiastic about that, and they were not initially the drivers behind it. The dynamic, this kind of transition is explained very well in James Barr's Lords of the Desert, um, and there were moments in the 50s where British influence was more dominant in the Middle East than American. But by the 60s and 70s, this has flipped, and it is America under the kind of Cold War conditions that has managed to really dominate the Middle East. And Anglo-American rivalry in the Middle East is something that's really, really understudied. And James Barr does a really, really good job of talking about it, just as he did talking about uh, Anglo-French rivalries in the Levant.
This is Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. Boost Mobile gives you the same network coverage, speed, and service you're used to, just at a more affordable price. Why pay more if you don't have to? Offering reliable nationwide coverage backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Love your service or get your money back, no questions asked. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or head to boostmobile.com to learn more. After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers who cancel within 30 days of activation will have Boost service fees refunded. Activation fees, if applicable, and phone payments will not be refunded.
If this back-to-school season, talking to your teenager sounds like this. With Boost Mobile, make it sound like this. Come to your Boost store, get a line, and take home a tablet for only $99.99. Perfect for staying connected and studying anywhere. They're happy, and you save. Visit your nearest Boost store. Requires ID verification. New $20 per month tablet plan and $35 device setup fee. Taxes extra.
Hey folks, it's Mark Marin from WTF. Today I want to talk to you about Boost Mobile, offering reliable nationwide coverage backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. Love your service or get your money back, no questions asked. Boost Mobile offers the coverage, network speed, and service you're used to, but at more affordable prices. Why pay more if you don't have to? You can get an unlimited plan for $25 a month that will never increase in price, ever. No price hikes, no multi-line requirements, no stress. Visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find them online at boostmobile.com. After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 per month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
In 1963, the Shah launched the White. Just to say, so by the time you get to the Kennedy era, the Kennedy administration is more than happy with the influence that America has in Iran. It's more than happy with the flow of oil from Iran, and it's more than happy with the corporate profits that are being made from Iran. But part of the kind of the ethos that Kennedy felt was necessary during the Cold War was to at least pay some token effort to democratic norms. later, under Johnson and under Nixon, this becomes much more of an afterthought, if remotely considered at all. But you have this paradox of this undemocratic coup led by the British and the Americans against Mosaddegh, a democratically elected and highly popular leader, and then later on a desire for some sort of democratic legitimacy, but as long as, colonial relations are soundly protected first. In 1963, the Shah launched the White Revolution, his far-reaching plan to re-engineer Iranian society. He aimed to borrow the left's ideas about social justice and equality while implementing them without revolutionary violence or class warfare. The centerpiece of the White Revolution was a land reform plan that broke up many of the big inherited land holdings and parceled them out to former tenant farmers. It also included a national literacy campaign, introduced suffrage for women, and nationalized forests, pasture lands, and water resources. Other legislation privatized state-owned enterprises and allowed workers to earn shares in the companies where they worked. The White Revolution remains a source of huge controversy even today. Its supporters say it essentially succeeded in its aim of breaking down some of the structural barriers that held Iran back and creating a base for modern economic development. Its critics, including many of those who hold power in today's Islamic Republic, say that its reforms were primarily cosmetic and delivered on few of its promises. What is indisputable about the White Revolution is that it left hardly any aspect of political or economic life in the country untouched. It shook the social landscape, transitioning traditional landholding families gave up farming and moved into finance and manufacturing, spurring industrialization. Peasants who received their own land aspired to new middle-class lives, and millions of other rural Iranians began to head to the cities which beckoned with jobs and factories. Urbanization, which utterly transformed the face of the 20th century, was off to a roaring start in Iran. The impending oil boom of the 1970s would turbocharge it. The Shah himself was a contradictory figure. A playboy in his youth, he retained until the end of his days a fondness for beautiful women and flashy cars. Yet he was also intelligent, a hard worker, and with a strong sense of duty. Like his father, he spent considerable amounts of energy trying to check the power of the Shiite religious establishment, but he also harbored a personal brand of deep, almost mystical belief in Islam. At some moments, he gave way to vacillation or crippling paranoia, while at others he displayed considerable political astuteness. He relentlessly pushed for greater economic performance, even as he indulged in the traditional prerogatives of a monarch who regarded the entire country as his personal property, amassing enormous wealth and tolerating a highly visible corruption among his relatives and courtiers. So we have this huge, far-reaching economic and social revolution, the White Revolution of the 1960s, that creates tensions for that would be exploited in the 1970s. The Shah was very wary of Iran's communists, and probably had drawn kind of examples from Russia's history, where the industrial spurt that happens just before the revolution. I mean, of course, you have the First World War to contend with, but the industrial spurt created revolutionary tensions that had previously gone, not been quite as accentuated. And it was the Savak that was going to be the principal tool of oppression against the communists. So Christian Carroll writes, the Shah had launched the White Revolution in recognition of the urgent need to co-opt the left's demands for radical reform. For years, Iran was the home of one of the Middle East's most powerful communist parties, the Tudeh, and he and his courtiers were well aware of its ability to exploit social tensions. In 1949, the Shah barely escaped an attempt on his life, and the young gunman was identified as a member of the Tudor, though historians have since disputed the accuracy of this claim. The Shah unleashed a huge police action against the communists that did considerable damage, but he also knew that the party could be eliminated for good only by addressing the political conditions that sustained it. The White Revolution, as historians have sometimes said, was designed above all to head off a red one. In this, at least, it succeeded, but the costs were high. In reality, the reforms almost always imposed from above. They were always imposed from above with little feedback from below. They were ill-conceived and often erratically implemented. The Polish journalist Richard Kapuscinski wrote a vivid account of the Iranian Revolution in which he observed, "Development is a treacherous river, as everyone who plunges into its currents knows." He was right. The Iranian regime's uncritical admirers overlooked the destructive effects of the Shah's reforms. So, here's the thing. The Shah spent the years sort of 63 to around 77 building up huge social tensions. You can build roads, you can build hospitals, you can build towns and shopping malls and ports and power plants and all this kind of stuff, but the pace at which the population can step into modernity with you is very often fixed. And in the case of Iran, what many on the kind of the conservative clerical Shiite um, uh, sector, sort of portion of society, and the kind of the middling merchants of what we call of the bazaar, the kind of the everybody from small street traders up to kind of quite well to do traders, what you would think of as a kind of like a petty bourgeois in Great Britain, or a Mittelstand in America, in Germany, sorry. That class and the kind of the conservative religious bloc saw change of this pace as the erasure of Iranian national identity. They were saying, well, you're westernizing us. Look at the cars on the street. Look at the fashions people are wearing. Look at the Coca-Cola they're drinking. And the influence of America and the fact that the ways of life in Iran are being erased. Yes, hospitals are nice. Yes, there are useful things being built, but the way in which Iranian people think of and envisage themselves and imagine themselves and their society is being gradually kind of erased. And there is a kind of, you see this replicated where there have been kind of moments of political revolutionary Islam in the Middle East in the 20th century. Often it's to do with the fact that the country in question, be it Saudi Arabia or Iran, is a client state of the United States of America, and elements of modernity that are popping up are specifically Americanized ones, which are often unwelcome. For one thing, the Shah did not really trust private initiative. Instead, he followed the reigning economic orthodoxy laid down by the post-war theorists of development economics and reinforced by the lending policies of the World Bank. It was a model heavy on state intervention, which suited the Shah's centralizing proclivities just fine. He believed in planning rather than markets, protection rather than openness to trade. One of the core tenets of this approach was import substitution. Rather than pay for goods produced outside of the country, the Iranian government pushed for the creation of indigenous manufacturing in fields ranging from electronics to helicopters. While this created jobs and promoted growth of a domestic technical class, These new industries, usually state monopolies that were protected from external competition by high tariffs, turned out to be inefficient. The high costs of this sort of development were the hidden costs of this sort of development were high, and so these projects tended to become a drag on the economy in times of crisis. One reform effort in 1972 offered a good illustration of the sorts of political disruptions that could result from breakneck modernization. The Shah's planners decided to introduce the Western-style mass production of bread. Iranian consumers generally preferred the traditional bread that was baked fresh each morning in the ovens of the local bazaar, but nobody asked them. Some 6,000 bakery workers lost their jobs, though the planners had assumed the number would be even higher. Shoemakers were hit by a similar shift, almost overnight, to automated manufacturing. Such measures were part of the government's broader effort to encourage a rational economy of modern supermarkets and department stores, one in which the bazaars and the long-established guilds no longer played the influential role to which they were accustomed. This eroded the Shah's support amongst the more traditional members of the middle class, who had expressed their growing opposition by building ties to the dissident clergy. So, modernization has to be carefully managed. Modernization, as Richie Kapuscinski says there, is it's a powerful current if you choose to dive into it. There's nothing kind of illogical per se about developing domestic industries. What you can see in the case of Great Britain and America is that the kind of elimination of domestic industries, the offshoring of domestic industries to Southeast Asia, has been a genuinely extremely bad idea, and actually kind of fairly catastrophic one. So domestic industries are fine, but what happens normally, as in this case, is that as new economic models, economic formats are introduced, old ones to which people have deep emotional and cultural and even spiritual connections can be erased. The replacement of fresh bread in the bazaar, and all the kind of the social interactions and the social meanings that people make around that are, to replace that with kind of mass-produced bread in supermarkets. Well, no doubt there are some fringe economic benefits to that, but people very often will hold on in a deeply passionate and powerful way to that which makes them who they are, that forges their sense of self. And thusly, there are revolutionary upheavals in 1979. But that's a story for another time. So anyway, if you're looking for further writing on Iran, check out the website because it's all there. So anyway, thanks very much, and I'll catch you on the next Explaining History podcast. All the best. Bye-bye.
With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.